I do, you just can't see it. That's why I like patterned scarves. Patterned shirts. Oh. Okay. Ready?
Okay, sure.
Welcome everyone to the board briefing. We will open this meeting at 2:01 and jump right in with ARPA funding, and I'll turn it right over to Rachel.
Okay. So I provided the leadership team with the updated list of ARPA projects. We talked about it at length last week. Since then, been working extensively with leadership as projects have come up, ideas they have, updating costs, whether it was budgeted, not budgeted, if there's a contract in place, all the things that we're trying to affirm before decisions are made on whether they'll be supported by ARPA or not, and working with the treasurer's office and ensuring these numbers are accurate. So what I sent out a couple hours ago and have printed out for you here is the best information we have at this point in time. This first document, I split the pages. This first document is everything that you have previously awarded that we've been spending on. And the red again is the balance of a project that either wasn't done or came in under budget. So there's a carryover. This all feeds an outstanding balance of which you've already approved of $578,000. So that's a data point. The projects in white that are outstanding are carried forward onto the larger sheet. And those projects are contained at the top of the larger table under existing allocations. So everything in white on here is under existing allocations here.
Okay.
I just wanted to pull it forward and get rid of all the gray.
Okay.
Okay. So in the box at the top, this is an updated snapshot of our cash, actual interest. And as we talked about last week, we have learned that interest accrued does not have the same timeline to spend it by, or to be obligated by at the end of this year. So there's some separation of the numbers.
Okay.
So we need to obligate Sorry, I was questioning my numbers for a second here. Yeah, so I have $3 million to obligate, because that includes both, yeah. So $3 million to obligate by the end of this fiscal year. And that includes the existing allocations and the new allocations. And so the colored boxes, everything in green is the general fund. And what is in orange are recommendations of what would not be supported by ARPA, because if we fund everything that has been asked for, we're overspent. So the orange amount in the upper box is just, I didn't do a complete savings of $201,161 because I didn't want to start splitting the hairs on projects. That's going to happen eventually, but for this exercise, I just did some grabs at what got it close. So the existing allocations at the top, we've already gone through there. I don't think there's much discussion there. Those are still on point to be either contracted for or as we need to. And then under the new allocations, I think I'll go line by line by this if it helps. And I added some columns for decision making, if it's already contracted, if it's a backfill project, and if it was budgeted or a new project. So
For one point of clarification,
Yep.
You had just said allocated by the end of this fiscal year, but did you mean by the end of this calendar year?
Calendar year.
thank you. Yes. Yep. And allocated
was
means
thinking,
contracted.
"Ooh,
Yeah, no, sorry. Thank you. Okay, so under new allocations, Big Trout Bridge, we talked about how Chris is doing a bit of a shell game with Big Trout Bridge and the Kilchis house, and he had some savings from the beams, and he's reallocating money from the Kilchis house. The combined original allocation to Public Works. From this exercise, he's shifting that to Big Trout Bridge.
Okay.
So technically a new allocation, but the money was previously awarded to Public Works for a different project. The BLM traffic analysis, that was a contract for a contractor to do work for the BLM purchase. I had a larger number here before because we hadn't had a bill for it. I was able to get that bill that was outstanding from several months ago. So that dropped. I think I had $12,000 or something there before. The facilities McKinstry energy audit, that's our next phase of work with McKinstry. The exhaust fan, water heater, elevator upgrade, those were all projects that we had in the building improvement fund. The courthouse space assessment. So I did get an updated, or I did get an estimated cost from DLR for what that would cost, and it's $75,000. So that is not a budgeted cost, but it's something that the board has expressed interest in doing. 301 expenses. This is a number from Sean in going through what we have spent in 301 that we can do general ledger entries to make this a backfill. Those expenses include the front door repairs and the office painting in the clerk's office. The DA office reno is not the larger reno, but there's 2 offices next to the Justice Court. They're occupied by DA office staff. There was some work we just did in there that was not budgeted. The assessor reno design. So we had talked about, I had talked about some work that I was collaborating with Cassandra on in updating their space on the assessor side. And we were starting to move on that, but if we're going to do the facilities condition assessment and giving the cost of this, and this is just for the design, and talking with DLR, they did give me an estimate of what that would cost, and it's on here, but definitely suggested waiting. They see more often than not when an assessment is done after remodel of what this would be, it's often changed. So, and the original concept here was to have a retainer contract to wait until the facilities assessment the space assessment got done, but then have the money locked up in that retainer contract to be able to proceed with the assessor reno. But there was just a lot of uncertainty if that's what we would end up doing. So recommending not proceeding with that at this time. The treasurer's office floor repair, that is not a budgeted project. It's a repair that needs to be done. I don't know how much it's going to cost. I think we just need to pull it out of 301 because I don't know the timeline and contracts for that. Similar.
Sean, is that?
Yeah, don't trip when you come into my office because the board is already warping again that Kevin replaced and he had to put some more screws in so that you don't trip over it when you come in.
And do the big orange cone in the middle of your office.
It's right in the middle of the doorway.
The card access, it is budgeted. The grant was applied for, wasn't received. There's still some opportunities that we can get grants, which I would like to explore, but worst case, we could still pull that out of 301. It's a relatively small cost. I would still want to do that this fiscal year, but not with ARPA. The indirect cost allocations, those were on the last sheet. Did you sign those yet?
No, I haven't gotten them back from you. You were going to look over it.
I thought I made that clear.
And I haven't sent them to county council yet.
Okay. Okay. New desk for Sean, the classification study. And that is, so the total contract is 45.1. Some of the expenses have already been paid for and journal entry corrections done, which is reflected in the ARPA cash, which is why the total contract cost is not there. Or why it's split up. Troop compensation request, that's a new contract for marketing that needs to be done for positions that come up in the meantime between now and the market. The compensation and pay equity study. We do not have a cost estimate on that. I have $100,000 here based on increasing the cost of what Troop's estimate was. It's out to bid right now, and we will know that cost on the 4th. So I'm being conservative there. I'm hoping that'll come down a little bit. Mike, a second contract for Mike to take us into next calendar year, the Tiberius financial assessment work, legal audit as part of the strategic plan. And as we've talked about it actually over the last couple of years about how much we're paying for legal services and how our model is working with who we have on staff and using outside counsel. And that was identified in the strategic plan as well as the budget roundtable. And so in working with Mike, he identified a law firm out of Eugene that he's worked with that has done this for other counties and cities. And so they prepared a scope of work. And I've talked to Bill and Joel about this and let them know that this is something that we're doing as part of our trying to make sure county's doing the best work that we can and make sure that our services are being provided as it supports all of the county departments. And so that is a contract that with the board's support, I've talked to you individually about that. I can sign this week. It's a 6-week project and we should know a lot in January out of that.
Okay.
Communication contractor for central services. I think it'd be great to have a PIO in central services. It's certainly not full-time work, but we could benefit from time to time. I'd like to talk to Marlene's contractor that she's just hired. I just met her today actually at the board meeting. It's not urgent. So I'm recommending that we postpone that one. DCD postage machine. That was new. Support for Sarah with the BIOP consultant, 20,000. The Oregonians for floodplain protection, 10,000 toward that litigation. Cost for the new vehicle for the communications department and upfitting, that's spent. Yes, that's a journal entry change and that was budgeted. 2 vehicles for the sheriff's office and upfitting that was budgeted. The SO MDT replacements and docking stations, our records are showing that some of those were budgeted, but not all of them. So it's a mix, but there's the total cost there and some of the detail. 2 line items for SO body cameras. There's an existing contract that can be a backfill project, but also looking at spending or securing an additional contract for the next year. The jail backup generator, the bids. So this is the number I received last week. It was higher than what I thought it was before. I thought it was 145, then it went up to 160. Bids were received, but not through the procurement process that we need to do. So the bid is actually lower than that was received, but we have to go through the formal process. So I don't know if we're going to meet those timelines. We're going to try to. My recommendation would be is to keep it in here for a week or two and see if we can meet those timelines. And if not, that money would be allocated elsewhere. But because of what this project is and the urgency that it needs to be replaced, I would recommend that since we're able to backfill a lot of other general fund costs, that we just proceed with paying that probably out of the building improvement fund.
How big is that generator, just out of curiosity?
I don't know.
Josh and Matt are both online.
How much?
I said Josh and Matt.
Actually, I do know. I have the spec right here from Fernando.
Is it diesel?
It is a 200 kilowatt generator, 3-phase, 24 hours, sub-base fuel tank with a block heater.
So is it
Is that how-
diesel or propane? I'm just curious.
I don't have the rest of the
It would be
detail.
diesel.
I'm guessing it's diesel like ours do, yeah. Let's see. The jail fire suppression, camera door, plumbing, those were all we talked about those last week. Those were budgeted. Lots of copier purchases. And those are all general fund. The IS network switch replacements, this wasn't a budgeted item, but IS said if you're looking to spend ARPA, we could use some switches. Otherwise, they can purchase it out of another fund.
Yeah, that should be 125.
Oh, he said 122.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Is that the computer reserve fund? The 2 softwares, 5-year licenses. We haven't typically done 5-year licenses, but again, we were trying to spend the ARPA money. So I said, Jeff, what do you got? And we came up with the 5-year licenses for Justice Court and ORMS, which is used by several or a few county departments. Because we don't have to do the 5-year licenses, this could be something that we could reduce just down to our 1 year, and we're not spending as much of the ARPA money. So I would recommend that we could reduce that or omit that. And then the computer purchases for special revenue funds and copiers. The costs are there. Those are new. And then the last box has a few projects that I think we need to do in the near future, in the early next year, but they wouldn't fit within this ARPA funding because of the timeline, but they could go toward, they could be supported by the interest money that we have a little bit more flexibility on. One new project that came up today in talking with the assessor's office, there are a few properties in the county, few entities that have a property that have delinquent taxes that we cannot accept, or we cannot collect the taxes for. There's a long history. They've been on the books for a long time. There's several different accounts and tax lots, but the short of it is they could benefit from having to get these off the books, $50,000 that would pay these delinquent taxes.
That would-
So
I'd have to check with the auditor.
she's checking with you on that.
Okay.
So this just came up. So I don't know if it's eligible yet. And I don't even know if we can do this through the timeline or statutory or audit. But it's a new idea I wanted to throw on the table because they brought it up. And if it is eligible, but for whatever reason, we can't meet the timelines because there's a process we're not aware of yet, it could also be in the post 12/31 allocation. So that is what I know. And if anybody has clarifications to what I've shared, please correct me.
Paul, do you want to come up front? I don't know why you're all the way in the back of the room. Oh, nice.
So are we oversubscribed now with the totals?
We are oversubscribed if you approve everything in well, you've already approved existing, but if you approve everything in the new allocations. So I took the liberties to start the conversation based on timing, backfill need, and general fund versus special revenue fund. I'm suggesting for starters, to get you going in this conversation, that everything in orange would not be supported by ARPA, which balances the $201,000 difference in yellow with the 200,000 in orange. So if you add up everything in orange, that comes to the 200. And that's just my initial take it or leave it.
So then we're within 1,000.
And I would say all of these numbers are, a lot of these numbers are going to change because they're not contracted yet,
Yeah.
but I would say we're there based on this level of analysis. And I would also add that I think going through the ones in orange, the assessor reno probably should be on hold anyway if we're doing the space assessment. The treasure floor repair, the card access, that's happening anyway. We can decide at a later date, or we can pull from other funding somewhere if we actually want to do the communication contractor. And the Magic software and ORMS licenses, we can drop that down to 1 year. And the rest is special revenue fund.
Okay. Well, this list looks great to me, and I really appreciate how much of it is in the general fund. I really appreciate that work, not only on your part, but on other departments who went through and provided the information about what in their budgets would qualify for ARPA. So there isn't anything jumping out at me that I would change. I like your recommendations. I like your recommendations for the things to hold. Not that those aren't important, but that they can wait. It makes sense to me to wait on assessor renovation until we do the facilities assessment. That's just logical. So it makes sense to me, you know, if we need that software, the Justice Court software and the RMS software. If we need it, we need it, but we don't need to spend that much for the 5-year license. So nothing's jumping out at me that I would suggest that we change. Anybody else?
I'm looking for things that would be, require a heavy service or replenishment, or in other words, you buy something, create it, and you've got ongoing costs. I didn't see anything that's really not a one time. And I think maybe that was the original idea going in, but you know, it doesn't make sense to spend $80,000 and then have to spend 20,000 every year to keep it working. But I don't see that. I didn't see anything that requires a license or whatever, except the software. It was the treasurer software. Is that an annual licensing?
It is an annual license, so this is just the initial, they come in, because it's a brand new software system. It is not our current one, it's no longer supported. So it is a new software system I would be asking for anyway every year, so. This is
So
for the
is this
initial.
the indirect cost thing? Okay. Other than that, no, I'm pretty good with what I understand so far.
Yeah, I agree. I don't see anything. I think, you know, I don't see any issues with what we have here. I think there's a couple of things we're pulling back that we will get to. And it's as long as that's the case, I think it's a good jumping off point. We know over the next couple of weeks, there will be some tweaks. I think that's the other thing I don't want to get in today to the pennies, because we don't even know what the pennies are yet.
Right.
We know that by magnitude, we've identified enough things in the general fund that either have already been paid for and we are backfilling, or are budgeted and we will be using this money for, as well as things that we have known we needed to do, you know, and are identifying the opportunity here. So no, I feel good about where we are.
That is a lot of contracts to procure in the next month.
Most, it's very. Yeah, and some of them are direct points or they're already in place.
Okay.
So there is no information in the contract column. It doesn't mean that it's not almost to the finish line. I
Okay,
didn't go
okay,
into the research.
okay, good.
Like the exhaustion of 3750, that's an invoice.
Okay.
So
Okay, good.
that's a mix.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Paul, questions, concerns? 2 thumbs up?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Awesome. Okay.
So can you get all this done? I mean,
I have to.
it's pretty, yeah, but it's pretty heavy list, list and lift.
So I think you approved the copiers today, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, a big part there. I know Matt or Josh, if they want to speak, they were working on the vehicles and what was the other one?
Jail stuff?
Yeah, I'm working with the SO on the generator. I know Matt's working on the upfitting contracts and the vehicle purchase. Yeah, we'll update weekly, and just if we get to the finish line, we know we have stuff we can put the money to, that isn't on this list.
Okay.
That's not a contract.
Tax thing then that we talked about a little bit ago.
So that is a project that you need to decide whether you want that on here or not.
Sounds like we need to know a little bit more before we make that decision, that we're waiting to find out if it's even eligible per the auditor and what the process is, so that next week when we revisit the list with the updates of, here's what we now know, that would be something that would come into play potentially then and only then.
Okay. Well, this is it's encouraging, you know, it's a lot of good work. It's a lot of important stuff.
So we won't see this list again until there's another pandemic.
Let's do this list next week.
Mhm.
You know,
We won't see this funding
This
again.
type of funding.
bunch of money.
Yeah. Okay. Do we have anything else on this? Great work, thank you. All right. Well,
Look at that.
colleagues,
I know.
yeah, maybe. Do we have, that's our only topic that we had planned. Do we have additional things we need to talk about today?
Trying to think of updates that maybe we want to, since we have the time. Doug, do you have your typical list? Are you winding down?
I have only 7 items.
Since Doug has 7 items on his list, I'm fine if Doug goes first.
Okay, please.
Okay, well, let's see this. There was an individual, I think he first contacted Commissioner Scar about an FM radio system that might be available for nonprofit use or something. This guy has a license. So I finally connected with him today for about a half hour, and he's some kind of a broker with nonprofit radio systems. He's in Los Angeles. And it wasn't, it's a rather odd conversation. He's going to send me some more stuff, but he has a license from the Federal Communications Commission for a whole bunch of stations, some of them low power and geared towards non-commercial. And he's obtained the call letters, which used to be a commercial call letter, KYTE license for 90.1 FM. And he's saying if we put it up on Mount Hebo, it would run like 25 watts and serve South County. And if it went up on elsewhere, it might go up to 100 watts, which could cover a fair amount of Tillamook County. And it has to not go over the hill to interfere with others. But he's done some business with a company called Oak Ridge Community Radio. It had something to do with the University of Oregon. He's got one down in Cottage Grove. But he's working on the whole West Coast, and it wasn't at all clear where the money comes from to do this and how it sustains itself. It was like he picked this stuff up at a garage sale, which I don't think he did, but it was really an odd conversation. I know enough about this stuff to at least talk to him about the Federal Communications Commission and what they did. And he said, it's all ready to go except for the transmitter of the antenna. Well, that's what you need with radio is a transmitter and antenna. So he says, well, you use a computer. I asked him about a studio and, recording devices and all that. And he said, well, no, you do it all on a computer and then you plug it into a transmitter to be acquired, which then hooks to an antenna to be acquired on a location to be acquired. So it's, I wouldn't say it's wishful thinking, but it was really an odd conversation. And I couldn't tell if he was selling something or fencing something, and I don't think he was, but it just was different. So I told him to send more stuff, and if he does, then I'll see where it goes. But he did say there was something in Bay City that he had used or set up before, where they had some kind of a community radio station.
They do.
They could put out public service
They do.
announcements and meeting schedules and stuff like that. And people listened in evidently, but they don't necessarily do commercial. So I don't know where you get the money to sustain an overtime operation. I mean, it was like nothing I'd ever heard commercial nonprofit. It just didn't make sense, but it's a big world full of lots of people.
Thank you for following up on that, Doug. It was
Yes.
my understanding from the email that it was tied to Mount Hebo. So I was like, well, let me give this
Well-
to Doug because it's South County.
That's all.
And he knows radio and
Fair.
I know nothing. But and I think one of his conversations or earlier emails was maybe our emergency response group would want it because it is an FCC license. It is
Yeah.
ready to go. And again, I thought it was tied to Mount Hebo when he had sent
Well,
me
that's
the
one
email.
option. He said, first of all, you might find somebody who wants to put up an antenna in his backyard. And then I asked him about Mount Hebo. He said, well, if you go up there, you have to reduce the power because you're up higher and you can't interfere and blah, blah, blah. And he had some pretty good answers, but he had some that were incomplete.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I was trying to remember who referred
We'll
him
see.
to.
So that's one item.
Interesting.
Let's see, then I'll just mention what's going on at Lightwave, and Mr. Scar was there. We've looked at several options as to where Lightwave might go. And I think we're really kind of down to two. One is we stay the course with the two organizations, and you were on there as well, and so I'll just say it from anybody else who might be listening, is we stay the course, see what happens with the deed process for extra money and analyze it sometime, maybe in 4 to 6 months, have a good deep dive again. The other was maybe at some point consider transferring it via sale to Astound or some other organization, but keep it together as an advisory representing maybe the public sector and to whatever commercial interest took it forward. So if it's Sound or somebody bought it, they could keep doing what they're doing and marketing and picking up subscribers. And then, but there would be Lightwave just as a something that might meet quarterly to review what's happening, and even though there wouldn't be a financial effort. So that's all to be determined. What we did say, just for the record, was that our underserved population may not be quite as bad as we've been led to believe over the years. There's maybe, well, I think it was 1,100 to 1,400 that could use much better service. But out of several thousand, 7, 8, 9,000, that's not a huge number. It's probably achievable, and some will never be served, maybe because you can't or they don't want it. But it's not like a third of Tillamook County has no internet. I think there's been some progress made on the commercial side as well. And I know Ziply, which is one of the bigger providers in Oregon, is looking around, and they've made an inquiry, and I asked them for some more stuff and haven't heard back. So anyway, so that's more to come on that one. We're headed towards a meeting Monday with the fair with Cami and with Nan to talk about long-term financing. I think I mentioned before, we could get a consortium of banks. They may say, well, yeah, we'll give you $1 million and you can take care of some of these capital needs at the fair. But right now they seem to be doing it like $50,000 and $80,000 at a crack. And the bigger things are being pushed off and getting worse. And there's a master plan, as you well know, but I haven't seen a master financial plan on how to pay for all this stuff. And so I'm thinking if we could talk the local banks into say $1.5 million, and then have it serviced through the TLT monies that go that way anyway, or their normal cash flow, which is over $1 million a year. Maybe that be a way to get some economies of scale and take care of some of these fire life safety things and roofs that are dripping here and there, especially on the main building, the dome building. From what I understand, there are some fairly significant structural or roof problems longer term. It's not going to collapse under its own weight, but it's kind of like the grandstands. It doesn't have a long, useful life ahead of it. So anyway, more to come on that one, I guess. And Colpac has a meeting coming up. Another thing that I've mentioned on the radio thing is this OCZMA, which is now becoming active. That's the Oregon Coast Zone Management Association. And it one time, going back years, it goes back 30 some years, it had all the counties, most of the cities, port districts, soil and water conservation districts. It was pretty active in having a say and a seat at the table in what goes on in the ocean. And then went into abeyance, I guess, during COVID, and the Association of Oregon Counties was operating it and providing some support and minutes and setting up meetings and stuff, but it wasn't a player up until recently. And now we've interviewed 2 organizations to take over for AOC. And so I guess I'm just reporting that it's now, there's a movement now, and there's people from the city of Newport and the port of Newport and a couple of other counties. Not so many way down south, but the north central is pretty active. I think Lincoln County port, some of the ports. And so I think this can come back online and say, okay, when something's going on in the ocean, whether it's undersea cable or wave energy or whatever it is, transportation issues, there would be another player representing specifically the coast. So we'll see about that one. And let's see. So the last thing I want to talk about is retirement. I just wrote another addendum to clarify some things, questions that have come in from our meeting, and that are coming to Isabel and it's good. This is going to drag out a while, well into January, which means that I won't be here. So we need to get somebody who's pretty much up to speed on all this and can answer this stuff and whatever. And I'd be happy to meet with whomever and the part I know of it. But you might want to give that some thought and because this is a pretty key item. There are 4 parts of the retirement system currently, as you well know. There's the firm that's investing and actually monitoring the markets and taking recommendations for moving securities around. And then there's principal that does all the custodial behind the scenes stuff. And then there's the attorney and Millman. And so we're looking only at 2 and possibly a third, meaning an administrator who could be one of those that would manage the whole thing and have a single point of contact. And when Jody and I started on this, she really made a pretty strong case in my mind for having a single point of contact and an administrator that was looking over the shoulders of both the custodial firm and the firm that actually makes the investments or recommends them. And it could be one and the same, could be a big firm that does it all. Like Principal, they can do it all, and there are a number of others. And so I tried to clarify that because that was one of the questions is, what is it that you guys really want? So we want the ability to do business with 1 firm, 2 firm, maybe 3. We don't know till we get the proposal. We can restructure it if we want to, or we can leave it like it is with the same firms or different firms. So there's all kinds of options, but we need somebody who's a point person on that, and certainly the treasurer's there and Mary Jo, but I'm just thinking I'd like for all of us to think ahead a few weeks here when I'm fishing or doing something, and you guys are doing this stuff.
Okay.
There you go.
All right, thank you. That's great, thank you. All right,
That's all. Thank you.
that's all. Oh, thank you.
Okay. On that note, I mean, I started in that conversation with Mary from One Digital 3 years ago or whatever, when we started talking about our pension plan. So I can assist in getting that across the finish line if that needs to happen. Sean, I don't know if that's something your office would want to get engaged with and have not it be me. Happy to have all those conversations, but
She was at our meeting we had, the conference, which only had a couple. She was there, as was Mary Jo. So,
Did you want an answer today?
love to know what you're thinking, to know if how, how we might move this forward. You don't have to definitively say yes or no, but
Okay, the retirement was mostly handled out of HR, so I think it would depend on who is hired within the HR director position. But until then, I'm happy to help.
okay, thank you.
That's what I was thinking also, not that it's a good time to hand Rachel another project, but really it belongs.
Doing the retirement. I will just say, if I knew something about it, I'd be happy to step in, but it's not something I'm really well versed in, and then given the magnitude of what this is, I would not want to be leading it. I can, but I think it would be better served by someone who's more familiar.
And I
Well,
suggested,
when
I've been
we
working
offer-
with the attorney and the actuary previously, so happy to step back into that space just to get it over the finish line. And then we will need to figure out if it stays in HR, which could depend on who we hire, if they have that experience and knowledge, or if it needs to be based in finance. And some of that may depend on what the system is that comes back, if we stay doing exactly what we're doing, or if
Right.
something else comes along that says, aha, that's a better option, that might change where it sits as well. It might become simple, and then maybe it does sit with, Rachel or someone. So,
And it's basically a qualification. We're not interested in what they charge, at least now. And we don't need an immense amount of detail, but if they're qualified, then you can draw that out during an interview and so on. And I would offer this too, even if I'm not on the payroll. I don't like to walk away from
Mhm.
something that started. And if you called me, I would return your phone calls and I would come up here for a day.
Thank you.
Just because I've got some ownership in this and I want to do the right thing.
thank you for that, Doug. That's really
Very
helpful.
generous.
I'm
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
leaving town, at least.
You'll be at the Rose Parade. You're totally leaving town.
I'm going to town.
But you're coming back to town is what you're saying.
That's a-
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a couple quick things. So CFTLC, we held our elections at conference. I'm the chair of CFTLC. We did go ahead and re-elect Doug as the second Tillamook member and the voting member, recognizing that we would be doing our liaison conversation in the coming weeks, and that's fine. So once we finish the liaison conversation, we can share with them that selection. It can either, we can have that second voice, which is always a good thing that Tillamook County has done, I think, is to have a voting member that's not also the chair, but the chair can also carry the voting membership if no one else feels that it's something they have time and energy for. So at this point, I would recommend that we have the second person. It's great to have two people from Tillamook at that table. So that was CFTLC. I will be headed off on December 13th for the ONC Timber Annual Meeting in Salem. So that is one of our federal pieces to this. And there was, anyway, I will get an update. There was a lawsuit pending in front of the Supreme Court for the ONC lands to try to return them to Greater Harvest. That lawsuit was thrown out at the Supreme Court level. So we will figure out what the next approach is from ONC as to how to really encourage there to be more harvest. I think we've seen that there is the Northwest Forest Plan update is coming. And so we partnered with ONC and they provided comments in that process on behalf of all of the ONC counties, which included Tillamook. We signed a letter last year giving them essentially the proxy to speak on our behalf and send comments. So hopefully we will hear something more out of the meeting on the 13th as to how they feel that process is going and whether there's any hope going forward for a change. I think hopefully you both received the letter from U.S. Forest Service that was saying, hey, this is what's happening. These are the options that are in the EIS. The EIS is posted online. It is somewhere akin to 1,000 pages. So if any of you feel like you've got some extra time and something you'd really like to fall asleep to, I'm going to guess the EIS would do just that for you. Fall this time. I'll send you that link. So that it continues to move forward. It is not a huge impact to Tillamook County. I think the last 2018 there was a payout to Tillamook County from the federal that included both the Forest Service and the ONC, which is managed by BLM, and it was $200 and some odd thousand at that point. It's that back and forth between timber receipts and SRS and just that whole tangled up mess for federal. So hopefully when I come back on the 13th, I will have a clearer picture of what it looks like today and going forward. But there is certainly hope that perhaps there will be more harvest. Okay. Deflection, just a heads up, we've had 2 planning meetings for the deflection process. We have Bridget from our Tillamook at Adventist Health that's sort of walking us through that process and as a facilitator, working with expertise, if you will, from OHSU. Interestingly, they've got 2 different folks on staff that are joining us. We also had a researcher from Portland State University that joined our last meeting, just kind of helping us see what other counties are doing, to see what the magnitude might be in Tillamook County and to try to build something that matches that. At this point, the build is really based on 2 things. What do we have to refer people to? Because there is not a huge amount of additional money to expand services by any means. It's just to create a referral pathway on this work. And then, so the second piece of it that was interesting was the PSU researcher was kind of giving us an idea of magnitude, that if we had 1 or 2 people in a week, that would be a high number of referrals in Tillamook County. And Paul and I were talking about this as well, and particularly in the short term, as we get law enforcement trained back up to understand how to do the investigatory pieces that are needed for a charge. It's going to be a very slow roll getting started, and may stay a very slow roll in our community anyway. But it's good work. It's good communications, I think, that are happening. And just, it'll be good to have that known process. So we're ready, whether it's 1 every week, 1 every month, or, whenever that happens. So the next deflection planning meeting, I believe, is December 20th. And we are supposed to have something at least sketched out by the end of January, I believe it is, to share with the state. So we'll keep working on that. But we've had good participation, the sheriff, the DA, Chief Troxel, and then the providers, et cetera. So that is going forward. And just heads up on our Tillamook is completing our strategic plan related to opioid response in Tillamook County. So we'll have more information coming forward on that probably in the next month or so as that strategic plan comes to to fruition. That's kind of where I've been.
Okay, thank you. Well, the only thing I don't think I've had a chance to tell all of you about is that on Monday, I had the opportunity to spend the better part of the afternoon with Governor Kotek, which was thrilling. I hadn't, I had never had a chance to visit with her.
Yeah.
And I had met her briefly, but I'd never had a chance to visit with her. And she was in Astoria touring affordable housing projects. And so I was invited as a member of the NOHA board. And yeah, it was really very good. So we toured. NOHA has a facility there that's senior and disabled housing, and right downtown. And we toured that facility, and which is lovely and really made me wish we had senior housing here in Tillamook County. Like we went through a little apartment that was vacant at the moment and it was charming, and it's a cool old building and high ceilings and a stunning view of the Columbia. And I thought, man, I would have been happy for my mom to live here. Market rate is probably a couple $1,000, but they're just really, really nice places. And she talked about, so we toured the facility, and then we looked at there's an expansion planned. We looked at that site, and then she had a press conference. And earlier she had been at the Columbia Inn, and we talked about the transitional housing that has been created since her administration, and her commitment financially to support sustaining the things that have been started. So she said in the upcoming budget, there may not be money for new projects, but that she is committed to not being a start and stop governor, but the things that have been started, that are working, she wants to be able to continue them. So we talked a lot about workforce housing. She talked a lot about workforce housing. She said, I get that there are people who are pushing back about housing for homelessness for whatever reason, but everyone in the state of Oregon should agree that we need workforce housing, and we need it. It's essential, and it's part of our economy. And so that was encouraging. So altogether, it was just a treat to spend that time with her and to hear her genuine passion on the subject. And it was nice. She's been to Tillamook before, but I was talking to Senator Weber about this. She said, her security is very tight, and so a lot of times she'll come through, and what you'll hear about it after the fact. But
only
yeah.
after the fact.
Yeah. So
Because they tell you, don't tell anyone.
right.
I'm sure you had that experience on
did.
Monday.
Yeah, we
Don't
did.
tell anyone. You can
Right.
go, but don't tell anyone.
Right, because one of our board members asked, like, can we invite other people? And they said no.
Yeah.
So, so also that part was interesting, the security part, the security people and how they planned, like what doors she'd come in and
Mhm.
which rooms she'd be in. And it was very interesting to see. And it made me think about that position and how many threats they must receive, which is sad.
Yeah, no, I had heard a story when I met with her last year, because don't tell anybody, blah, blah, about she was in Eastern Oregon and basically got surrounded by people, and they weren't gonna let her go. I mean, it was really, really close. And so just the caution that she uses. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, well, that's awesome. We
It
are
was really good.
hopeful that the funding that has come to Tillamook County through her homeless services work will continue to come to Tillamook County. So
Yeah.
that's
Yes.
hopeful that she's
Yeah.
talking in that way of keeping things going. I was supposed to meet with her yesterday morning at the Pig and Pancake in Seaside, but then she ended up going back to Salem. So it was a
Oh, okay.
virtual meeting talking about the small timber group. So. Yeah.
Okay.
But that's great. It's great
Yeah.
that she's reaching out. It's great that she's
It
in
was
our
good.
communities.
Yeah,
I mean,
was
that's the access is good.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and it was just nice to see some real human moments, like
Yeah.
Clatsop County Commissioner Mark Cuelo works with her on a number of things. I think among them the timber trust, forest
Mhm.
trust stuff, and he had met with her last year, and last year she took a picture with his 5-year-old daughter. So he brought his daughter again this year, and they got to
Yeah.
have the second picture together, And the governor obviously remembered the child, which was interesting, and talked to her about, oh, you're so much taller this year. And you could tell like the kid's face was just like, oh, she was lit up with it was cool. And she's a nice person. And people were talking about how long before she was governor, she was passionate about housing. And so how consistent that is.
Yeah.
So I was encouraged by it. I thought it was good. That's cool. Yeah.
I'm glad she gets out of Salem because
Yeah.
it's easy to get cloistered and protected and, Oregon's a pretty big state.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I've always, even though I don't agree necessarily with, the two senators, they have made a point to go to every county every
Mhm.
year and they've kept that promise.
Yeah.
And, that we've all been to their meetings over the
Mhm.
years and
They
do,
show
they'll
up.
show up in Burns or
Mhm.
wherever and at least they're acknowledging that everybody should have a voice. And I think that's good. So I'm glad to hear that. And I saw her down there and last year. I've seen her one or two other places, but she does get out and get around. And I
Yeah.
think that's good. Understanding there's probably security. She's probably got a couple of undercover cops walking around with her, I would guess.
Mhm.
That's the world we're living, but it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm glad she doesn't use that as an excuse to stay home.
Yeah, at least two people who were obviously for security detail, but there may have been more who were less obvious.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's all I have for now. Sean, do you have anything? No?
No.
Paul? Anything else for you, Rachel? All right. Well, I want to wish everybody a very happy Thanksgiving.
Yes, everyone enjoy your time. And we'll
And your
come
time
back
with
and
your
finish
family,
strong.
your
I know I
daughter
get to
and
go
your
see Moana
grandkids.
too. Look at that. I'm gonna make it.
Nice. That's great. Yeah, my brother's kids are coming to my house. I'm
Oh,
excited.
nice.
Yep, I'm happy. I'll be happy to see that. So, yeah, it's good. What are you and Patty gonna do?
We're going over to my daughter's, one who, used to, when she went to Oregon, she worked at a little restaurant, which is no longer there. I think it's called Something Special. And it was a one of a kind run by an older lady and she had students and she worked there 4 years. And I mean, she learned how to cook.
Ah.
The radio thing I mentioned, the health department gave us all this advice about them.
Turkey.
Poison herself and stuff. But, there's an art to it and she knows how to do stuff and, that's an art cooking. And I mean, some people can't boil water, but she can go a couple steps beyond that. And so we'll go over there and let somebody else feed us. And
That sounds wonderful.
Yep.
Are you hosting a big meal at your house?
hosting a big meal.
Nice, nice. How many people?
14 or 15.
Wow, that's fun. Bunch of kids?
A few, most of them.
Okay.
Okay. Not a lot of little.
Oh, I hope it's fun. And Sean?
No, just three of us, my daughters and are in Idaho, and they're going to her husband's grandparents and just three of us and mostly the boys are gonna go home for the weekend. Taking a few of us.
Oh, good for you.
Nice.
Great.
Quiet time.
All right. Well, happy holidays, everybody. So this meeting is adjourned at 2:54.